Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the honor of inviting me to be your commencement speaker. It's been really wonderful to hear Damiano speak. First of all, thank you for making me feel welcome by having a student speaker with an accent and who also happened to go to Cambridge. How perfect. And who has a fantastic sense of humor. Damiano, when you leave the New York Times, please don't go back to Italy. Come and work at the Huffington Post. A good what? Good pasta. Okay, I promise. And I promise not to let you be a dentist ever. Thank you also for your amazing faculty. I've heard so much about it, and I know Jeff Jarvis, who's been a mentor of mine ever since the Huffington Post was launched and before, and from whom I'm learning things every day, especially that spirit of experimentation, the desire to innovate, and the willingness to confront the world as it is and not as we would like it to be or as it was. I just really want to say two main things. The first is that there are eternal truths about journalism that are never going to change, no matter how technology changes and the world around us changes. And so I'm very glad to hear that Craft 1 and Craft 2 are part of your curriculum, because craft is always going to be an important part of journalism, no matter how much technology changes the way journalism is implemented. And still now, there is nothing that is as exciting as reading a well-turned phrase that combines storytelling, drama, and indeed puts the apostrophes in the right places. At the same time, as Jay Hersonson said, quoting Henry Grunwald, journalism can never be silent. And at the heart of journalism, for me, and my love for journalism, is the fact that it's ultimately about speaking truth to power. Whether you do it in print, on video, via Twitter or Facebook, the ultimate goal of journalism is to speak truth to power, especially when the truth about human nature, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, is as true now as it was at the time of Nero, just to mention another famous Italian. So given that, and given the fact that Milton Kundera, as he put it, the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting, journalists have that incredible responsibility to remember and to remind the world of things many of our leaders continue to want to forget. And knowing how to use drama and storytelling to tell the stories of those who have no voices is never more important than now, when the economic crisis that Dean Shepard mentioned is affecting millions of people around the world in ways that are increasingly dangerous and that lead to more and more suffering every day. At the Huffington Post, we created a new position that we're going to call the economic suffering correspondent, but then Arthur Delaney, who got the job, protested that it sounded too morbid and macabre, and so we called it the economic impact correspondent. But basically, his job is to literally take the numbers that we are confronted with every day, unemployment numbers, foreclosure numbers, bankruptcy numbers, and put a human face on them. Tell the stories of people all around the country who are being affected in a way that it can capture the public imagination and lead to change. Because we don't just want to change journalism. We want to produce the kind of impact journalism that can change the world. And that's why this profession continues to be so important. And traditionally, one of the problems and one of the traps for journalists, and I'm afraid the fact that you are graduating during a time of huge technological advance isn't going to make that trap any less dangerous, is the trap of access. The trap that because people in power open their doors to us, we are going to somehow become stenographers to power. So that's just my one piece of advice from watching what's happening around us. Don't let access in any way diminish the greatest gift that you have, which is the gift to speak truth to power, even if that means no more access. John Didion, in describing a very well-known journalist who occasionally has succumbed to that temptation of access, Bob Woodward, wrote about the scrupulous passivity, which is the main danger for so many journalists who have access. The passivity to report a story not as it has happened, but as it is being presented, which means as it is being manufactured. And we see that again and again in stories describing, for example, how the president reached his decision to escalate in Afghanistan. And if you read that story, giving you a kind of minute-by-minute account of how it happened, at first you're intrigued. At first you are drawn into this amazing amount of information. And then you realize, you know what? This was all spoon-fed to that writer. And he took it down, and he's giving it to us. And in the end, that's not the kind of reporting that changes journalism and changes the world. The reporting that does is much harder and infinitely more useful. So the second point I want to make has to do with the fact that we are living in such a different world, and it's impossible to continue to pretend that journalism will remain unchanged in the middle of all those huge technological changes. And I'm sure all of you here have seen the video, Did You Know?, that was originally produced by a math teacher, Carl Frisch. But there are a few facts from that video that I want to quote to you here today. Did you know that newspaper circulation is down 7 million over the last 25 years, while unique readership of online news is up 34 million in the last 5 years? Did you know newspaper advertising fell nearly 19% this year, while web advertising is up 9% and mobile advertising is up 18%? Did you know that more video was uploaded to YouTube in the last 2 months than if ABC, CBS, and NBC had been airing all new content every minute of every day since 1948, long before any one of you was born? And did you know that we have access to more than 1 trillion of web pages, 100,000 iPhone apps, and send more text messages a day than there are people on the planet? We are not in Kansas anymore, Toto. And that is actually very exciting about the future of journalism, in 2 primary ways that I want to mention. The first is that the obsessive nature of online media makes it easier for us to stay on a story and stay on a story until we can break through the static and something can change. And the other thing that is really exciting was demonstrated during the Iran uprising, which is when an oppressive power controls mainstream media, controls what you can see on CNN or what you can read in the New York Times. It is much, much harder to control Twitter feeds, Facebook updates, video camera downloads, and cell phone pictures. And so we saw that all those ways of communicating became the main way that we heard and read about the Iran uprising. And very soon after that, there was an uprising in China. And the Chinese government already had learned what to do. So what they did is they censored very successfully many of these new media, including Twitter, and instead they invited select journalists to the place of the uprising to actually spoon-feed them what was happening. So you may be able to control select journalists through giving them access, but it's much, much harder. Indeed, I would say it is impossible to control tens of thousands of citizen journalists using all the new media at their disposal, and above all, using their own passion to tell the facts and tell the truth, and control, therefore, what is being communicated out to the world. So you are here at this amazing intersection between eternal journalistic values and amazing new technologies that actually put the tools of journalism that were at first available only to the elite in the hands of everyone who with the passion and the energy to communicate to the world. And we've seen, in fact, that journalism does not just need to be saved, it needs to be strengthened and improved. Otherwise, how do you explain the fact that mainstream journalists miss the two biggest stories of our time, the lead up to the war in Iraq and the financial meltdown? So we've had, as a result, far too many autopsies and not enough biopsies. And we've also had far too many journalists who think that the truth is to be found by splitting the difference between two sides. How many times have you seen, for example, a debate on global warming with, let's say, Al Gore on one hand, talking about the dangers of global warming, and Senator James Inhofe on the other, telling us that global warming is a fraud, as though these two positions are equally valid. Well, they're not. And it would be absurd, for example, to have a debate between somebody who believes that the Earth is flat and somebody who believes that the Earth is round and treat those two positions as equally valid. Well, it is our job as journalists to also realize that in many other instances, the truth does not lie safely in the middle, but on one side or the other. And it is our job not to be Pontius Pilate and wash our hands off the responsibility to discover where the truth is. And so let me just end by saying that this is an amazing moment to be entering journalism. And with all that you have been given from this incredible course that combines eternal verities and all that is new, you are in a unique position to help not just transform journalism, but transform our world, which desperately needs transforming. Thank you.